Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Kamish Orr, and today I'm going to tell the story about how I ran an online baseball league for almost a decade. You could say that I grew up on baseball. When I was born, my dad gave me the middle name Jackson in honor of his favorite player, or one of his favorite players, Reggie Jackson. Some of my favorite childhood memories are the many baseball games that we would drive to see, and some of those games resulted in some pretty amazing stories of meeting some lesser known players, perhaps. My dad wouldn't just watch baseball when I was growing up. He and his brothers and some of their friends, and even my mom at one point, spent a few years playing Stratomatic baseball. They would draft teams comprised of the players at that time and compete against each other in short simulated seasons. I still remember how excited I was when I finally was old enough to play with them. I think I was around 10, maybe. Well, I played Stratomatic here and there. It was actually the explosion of computer baseball games when I was in my teenage years that really caught my interest. I went through a period there where I was buying nearly every computer baseball game there was on the market, always looking for the most realistic experience that I could find. I was one that actually favored the realism and stats more than just the eye candy and graphics. Problem was that most of the offerings were more focused on the graphics, and statistical realism kind of took a back seat. When I was in my early 20s, I started working with a guy named Shannon, and we became good friends because of our many shared interests, including baseball. Originally, I introduced him to one of my other favorite hobbies, Dungeons and Dragons, which we played with a small group for a number of years. That group kind of fell apart. This is the late 90s, and we were looking for something else fun to occupy our time when we'd get together on the weekends, and I suggested Stratomatic. Soon, we got a small group together to draft teams like the old days with my dad. In fact, my dad played with us along with my cousin and her boyfriend. And so the five of us had a drafted season again. After maybe a season or two, that group also kind of fell apart. Meanwhile, I was still searching for the great computer baseball game. At that time, the High Heat franchise seemed to be as close as I would come. This is in the fall of 1999 or so, and at that time, I was searching the internet for other games. I had played the Front Page Sports Baseball Pro series, which also seemed to be pretty good, and I came across another game that seemed to be different from the others, or promised to be, and it was called Out of the Park Baseball. Out of the Park Baseball was unique because it focused more on the flavor of the text rather than the graphics. In any event, while that game might have lacked the bells and whistles of an action baseball game, it did contain some pretty realistic stats and a realistic stats engine. On top of that, it had a career mode that would allow you to manage a team over many years with players who aged, developed, retired, got injured. You could even compete against other managers online in a simulated baseball league. Soon I was hooked. In 2001, Shannon and I were looking for something else to do, and we came up with the idea that we should compete in computer baseball. I tried to pitch him on the idea of using Out of the Park, but he was actually totally turned off by the lack of graphics. And so we ended up playing High Heat instead. The two of us drafted a couple of teams, and the league was rounded out by computer opponents. We would watch our own games and trade the league file back and forth by email throughout the simulated season. I'd often comment about how cool it would be if we were playing with other human opponents, not just the two of us. As I got more interested in Out of the Park, I joined an online league that allowed me to do just that. Like most online leagues, a week of the season was simulated 3 times each real week. That meant that you could get through about 4 seasons in the span of an actual real year. The league I joined at the time was amazing. I think it was the XBL. Is that the name of it? I was so engaged in how interactive it was. There's a great website with stories and activities that really made you feel like you were following a real baseball league. We'd pick our all-stars, the owners of the league would pick all-star teams. We would have various things that we could participate in that made it feel more real. I shared the league website with Shannon, and pretty soon he got pretty hooked watching my team to see how they were doing. He finally broke down and joined the league when there was an opening. But right before he started, the league ended up folding, leaving both of us wanting something more. While this was going on, we'd already been playing Stratomatic with a new card set that included all the Major League Hall of Famers. And one night we were playing and talking about other possible out-of-the-park leagues we could join, and Shannon mentioned that it would be great to play in a league that included legendary players like the Hall of Famers that we'd been playing with, but also playing alongside modern players. Like, that's actually how we had our Stratomatic league structured. There were a lot of out-of-the-park leagues that use modern players, and there were a lot of out-of-the-park leagues that used historical players. But I don't believe any at the time combined the two. Well, Shannon half-jokingly suggested that we start our own league since there wasn't one that fit. This half-joking suggestion got more real, and we started talking about all the possibilities for the league. The league itself had some distinct features that set it apart from other leagues. We decided on 26 core teams, each of them led by a legend from the team's history that could not be traded away. These legends were players like Ty Cobb for the Tigers or Babe Ruth for the Yankees, Stan Musial for the Cardinals, Ted Williams for the Red Sox, just to name a few. We would have eight of the 26 teams qualify for the playoffs, but we wanted something for the other teams to do. That was one of the things that we felt was missing from the other leagues we'd been a part of. Got to be a certain point of the season when you were out of playoff contention, and you kind of lost interest, kind of put yourself on autopilot for the rest of the season. We wanted to give those teams something to be excited about as well. So we decided that we'd have those remaining 18 teams compete in a triple elimination tournament. The winner of the tournament would have the honor of choosing any player from baseball history to bring into the league. The thought of these legendary players coming into the league like players stepping out of a time warp, or perhaps stepping out of the corn like at the Field of Dreams, led to the unique name for the league, Baseball Maelstrom. I believe Shannon came up with that, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, neither one of us knew anything about creating a website, and this was before the days where there were so many intuitive ways to build one, or sites that would easily create one for you. But I became determined to learn so that we could recreate that great website that our former league had had. So I soon taught myself enough to build a website using Macromedia Dreamweaver at the time. I purchased web space and a domain. I even created a trailer for the league using Flash. Now, the trailer was a big hit, and nobody had seen anything quite like it, I don't think. There's quite a bit of interest in our league, and it wasn't long before all of the spots for the owners were filled. The league officially began in March of 2002 with a draft, I believe, of players, actual players at that time, mixed in with these team legends, of course, that were on those teams on their respective teams. For the next 7 years, I would simulate games on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Through all my life events, I had kids growing up, a divorce and remarriage, all of the life events that you can imagine. I would wake up at 4:30 most of those mornings to import lineups from our owners and run the simulation and create a front page story recapping the highlights from the week's games. I even spent some time photoshopping the correct team hats onto the players so that the pictures would look more realistic for the league. I could usually do everything in about an hour or so, so I would do all of that and I go back to sleep for a little bit before I had to work for the day. During that 7-year period, I think I only can count on one hand maybe the number of sims that we had to cancel or skip. It was a pretty regular league, and one that the owners could rely on was going to take place. Our league was pretty popular and successful, so much so that we expanded to 28 teams soon after we started. We added the Tokyo Giants, led by Sadaharu Oh, and the Homestead Grays, led by Josh Gibson. Overall, we played through the 2001 to the 2027 seasons, through each new version of the game that came out during that time. Of course, many fictional players entered the game since we were playing into the future. But the one thing that didn't change was that we had our legends for each team and the legends that came in during for the winner of the tournament. So 7 real years of simulated baseball later, and I was starting to get really burnt out, actually. Started feeling like a job, and I needed a break from this 3 days a week job. I began to dread waking up to run the sims in the morning. Talked it over with Shannon, and we decided that it'd probably be in the best interest to take a break and put the league on hiatus. Shannon and I actually still played in a couple of online leagues, but running one of our own was just too much. A year later, we got the itch to run our own league again. And we started with the Draft of Legends again, kept many of the same features of our prior league. A lot of our original owners actually came along with us to the new league. We had a couple of really solid core owners that stuck with us during most of the league's history. The newest versions of Out of the Park had actually made league websites more turnkey with pre-generated league websites. And so I thought that might make it a little less of a hassle to prep the league 3 times a week. We called the second version of the league Maelstrom Jr. Sadly, it only lasted into its second year. Despite the ease of the uploads, it was still just quite a bit of time to run Sims 3 times a week. And, we could have modified the schedule, but we didn't really want to sacrifice the quality of the league for any reason. So we felt it was probably better just to call it quits than to run the league at anything less than the high standards we'd set for ourselves. Throughout all of those years, I continued to be heavily involved in the Out of the Park community. I was actually a mod on the Out of the Park Developments forums and was active there for many years. In 2004, I attended the one and only Out of the Park convention in Toledo, Ohio. That gave me a chance to meet a few of the fake baseball friends, meet them in real life. I've had a couple of other opportunities over the years to meet some of the other real people on the other side of the computer screen. And for the most part, all of them have been great people. I don't have quite the same passion for Out of the Park as I once did. Still a somewhat active member on one of the league message boards that I was involved in, even though I don't have a team in that league anymore. In fact, I don't play any online leagues anymore. And I haven't even played Out of the Park for several years now, even though I still follow it. Meanwhile, Out of the Park baseball has actually exploded in popularity. A few years back, Major League Baseball even used the game to simulate a dream bracket. Even though I kind of lost my passion for Out of the Park, I still have fond memories of those years running the league. Shannon and I still get together every now and then to play some Stratomatic, talk about the glory days of the league and all the fun we had. So even though real life eventually got in the way, for nearly a decade, nothing could compete with those fake baseball years. And so recently I got the itch again to get back into tabletop baseball. I think I still own the Out of the Park game, one of the recent versions. But there's nothing quite like dealing with cards, seeing the cards of the players and being able to, set lineups and feel like you have more control over the dice than in Out of the Park, where it's all done kind of behind the scenes. And so that's kind of what led me to not only start my own Baseball Maelstrom season with a new concept similar to the idea that I had before, or that Shannon and I had before, with 3 teams of Hall of Famers in each league and 1 team of non-Hall of Famers, but still stars. The idea of playing a historical season, it's a little interesting to me, but not as much so as the fantasy factor, the what ifs. How would a team of Hall of Famers stack up against a team of non-Hall of Famers? How would players of different eras compete against one another? Who would still stand out on top as some of the top players in a situation like that? And so that's what kind of led me down to the road to the Baseball Maelstrom League that I have now. I decided to take the old name. Seems suitable and fitting. Of course, much like before, I wanted to create a website. I had some experience doing some YouTube videos over the past couple of years since the pandemic. I actually started with a music reaction channel, believe it or not. That gave me a little bit of the experience needed to start another YouTube channel. And creating a website is much easier now. And so that's what I did. BaseballMaelstrom.com. You can head over and check out the action on my new league. So I just thought I'd take some time to fill you in on a backstory, if you will, on how I got to be where I am today with this league. I would love to hear your comments down below. If you've ever been a part of something like that lasted so long in real time. Are you a part of any leagues? I know there's a lot of Stratomatic or other or whatever other game leagues out there in real life that people participate in. So leave me some comments. Let me know what you've been a part of, for how long. Maybe you've just played solo this whole time. When did you start playing? What was the thing that sparked your interest? Is it something you've been doing since you were a little kid? Or something you picked up as an adult? I still run into people that have never heard of tabletop baseball at all, even baseball fans. So it's not something that's out there with a lot of people. But in any event, hopefully you've enjoyed this little story. Feel free to check me out on the website. Drop some comments here on YouTube. Thanks so much for listening and watching. And until next time, have a great evening.